trade Pokemon are one of the most genius aspects of game design, and yet it also sees one of the worst implementations in the series. Trade Pokemon are generally overpowered because they get double the experience gain, but they're also a great way to add flexibility to a player's encounter options. Trades give an early opportunity for a Pokemon that wouldn't naturally make sense appearing on an early route, but they can also provide help in filling out the dex or even giving you a final form that only evolves by trade itself. Or not. But despite the great potential, 70% or more of in-game trades are just very useless. And today we're going to be analyzing the NPC trades of every Pokemon game, seeing why this is such an inconsistent feature, and determining the best trade Pokemon in every game. Starting with Red and Blue, where we see trades utilized in a lot of different ways to varying levels of effectiveness. Like take Cinnabar Labs' triple threat of NPC trades. This building gives you the option to trade your Venonat for a Tangela, which could have just been caught on the way to Cinnabar, your Ponyta for a Seal, which is also found on the way to Cinnabar, or your Raichu for an Electrode, which can only be caught after Surf, aka once you get access to Cinnabar. So not only are these not a new or rare encounter, they're far too late to be worthwhile to run in your playthrough. The game also uses trades to distribute rare Pokemon, like the Farfetch you can trade your Sparrow for in Vermilion City. As much as I love the Icon Ducks, not even a 2x growth can make Farfetch better than the mighty Spearow. But what I like about this trade is it's actually a reference to an old Japanese folktale, and it's basically an intentional troll that you're giving up a really good bird for something that's too good to be true. But not all rare trade Pokemon are harmless. There's another trainer who wants Slowbro for his Lickitung. Sure, Lickitung is only found this way, so it does serve a purpose to fill out the dex, but I still don't like this trade. Slowbro is really good in Generation 1, so it just feels really bad to trade it for a normal type with terrible stats. Trades can also be used to give the player near or completely versional exclusive Pokemon like female and male Nidoran. In Red and Blue, you trade the more common one to get the rarer one, but given that both are in the game, I really don't see the point of this trade, and it's not even worth it to delay evolving your Nido this long. Another exclusive Pokemon trade is on Route 2, where you can get a Mr. Mime for your Abra. Now, this is overall a fair trade because not only is it the only way you can get Mr. Mime, but Mr. Mime is also just really strong. Because in terms of gameplay, you're just giving away one busted psychic type to get another. So it is a great Pokemon and it fills the dex, but I still feel like we could do better. And fortunately, there is one trade in Red and Blue that is excellent. Getting the Super Rod after the 3rd gym will grant you access to catch a level 23 Poliwhirl on Route 10. And if you fly back to Cerulean City, you can trade it for a Jinx. This is, once again, the only way you can get Jinx. But what differentiates this trade is it provides you access to an early Ice type well before you get access to the main habitat where Ice types live. See, if Jinx was locked to the Seafoam Islands, it would be a little bit harder for Ice types as a whole to ever actually get used. And this is just such a satisfying way to see Game Freak use this feature. Early Ice gives you a huge advantage against Grass Leader Erica, the Rival, Ground Giovanni, Bruno, Agatha, and Lance. It comes with Sleep, gets the Ice Beam TM right away, and Psychic type propels it to be arguably one of the top 3 Pokemon in the game. So Jinx is not only the best trade Pokemon in Red and Blue, but it's also the best element of game design too. Now, in the same way that Crystal and Emerald were 3rd edition titles, Japan's version of Pokemon Blue is quite different from ours. It's actually the Crystal equivalent 3rd title to Generation 1. And something that is both really cool and arguably kind of generous is they made it so that you can now trade a Kadabra to get Graveler, and it will just instantly evolve into Golem. You can also trade a Machoke for Haunter, which instantly evolves into Gengar. And if you're a Western fan that only has Yellow, you can actually take advantage of this as well. In Yellow, you can trade a Cubone for a Machoke, which will instantly evolve into Machamp. And even though Fighting type kind of sucks in Gen 1, Machamp doesn't even really care. It gets Earthquake, Body Slam, Gen 1 Hyper Beam, Gen 1 Dig, Rock Slide, even Fire Blast? And I think this is another great example of how trade Pokemon can be used so effectively. In the case of trade restrictions, even at the time, this was an annoying feature. And I think this really created a sense of goodwill with the player when you put at least one of these paywalled Pokemon in the game freely. And while Mr. Mime is really good, given how strong and easy Machamp is to get, I also think it's the best NPC trade in the game. Now, Fire Red and Leaf Green bring every trade from Red and Blue back, so that narrows down our list by quite a bit. Mr. Mime is way worse in Gen 3, so it's not worth it. Meanwhile, the Super Rod is now level 20 to 30, and this makes the Poliwhirl Jinx trade just even easier. The only new addition is you trading your Raichu to get an Electrode, which is really just okay, and so Jinx is also the best trade Pokemon in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Generation 2. Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Onyx is available to catch right after the first gym, but you can trade a Bellsprout to get one before it. Now, Onyx has a reputation of being a pretty awful Pokemon with low speed, bad special, and pathetic attack. But it manages to find a pretty crazy niche for itself in Gen 2. Onyx starts with Screech, which lowers defense by a wild 2 stages, and this pairs really well with its high defense. Unfortunately, a weird issue comes from the second badge, where the obedience cap is still only level 10 until you beat it. Now, like Onyx, Machop is available to catch after beating the third gym, but you can trade an Abra or Drowsy for one before it, and this thing has been keeping kids' runs alive for over 25 years. It resists Miltank's rollout, comes with stab fighting moves, and even is a guaranteed female to prevent attract. Considering how many Pokemon are relegated to points so late that they're unusable, it's not the best implementation of a trade here, but at the very least, it is extremely useful for beating Whitney. Similarly, Olivine has you trade the very common Krabby for a Voltorb. This is Voltorb's earliest instance, so at first glance, it's somewhat noteworthy. And I think what they were going for here is like, oh, you can get an electric type before you take on the water routes. Except Voltorb doesn't learn any electric moves, and you took Mareep out of the game, so I don't understand what's going on here. Now, in Blackthorn City, before the 8th gym, you can trade a Dragonair to get a Dodrio. Now, don't get me wrong, Dodrio is my absolute dog, but there are two issues here. The first is that getting Dragonair before the gym takes a lot of grinding, since the only way you can get a Dratini is either purchase one from the game corner at like level 10, or Goodrod Fish on the route below Blackthorn, where you can catch one at level 10. But once again, so weird is Doduo can be caught right after the 8th gym. Like, I guess maybe this is nice for players that decided to just give up grinding Dragonair because it's so bad for so long. But overall, I just don't see the vision that Game Freak had when designing Johto trades. Now, in Crystal Kanto, there's a guy who will trade you a Magneton holding a second metal coat. And this is really nice for getting the second metal coat evolution, but I would wager that like nobody even knew about this, so it's once again kind of useless. Still, it's better than the trade in Pewter, where you can give up your Haunter for a Xatu. Xatu is a Johto Pokemon, which was available in Johto 10 badges ago. And similarly, the gold and silver version of this trade has you giving away a Gloom to get a Rapidash, another Pokemon that was available before beating the league. But despite all this nonsense, Gen 2 is often forgiven due to one single trade. Chansey for an Aerodactyl, I take away all the bad implications of the rest of this post, Game Freak cooked. Except even this has issues, because it's stuck in Kanto at the very end of the game. And the chance that you're trading it for is level 25. So even with double XP, you're 30 to 40 levels behind blue and red. So really, even this trade, which is awesome, is kind of just a cool way to travel in style. So pretty much everything in Johto is stupid. Aerodactyl is the only rare trade, and Onyx and Machop are the only ones that gameplay-wise are actually good. Which is just so crazy when you consider how many Johto Pokemon are missing from Johto. I think we can all agree it would have been pretty awesome if there was an NPC that traded you a Larvitar, a Murkrow, a Houndour, but no, there's just a bunch of Pokemon that you get right after you beat the next gym. All things considered though, the Machop trade is at least very useful, and it is by far the best NPC trade in the game. Now in Heart Gold and Soul Silver's Kanto, they add a trade of your very rare Bonsly for a very much not rare Rhyhorn, and there's also a Pikachu for a Pikachu. The only noteworthy trade added in Kanto is the seemingly on-brand and very appropriate Steven trade, where he'll take your Fortress for a Beldum. Dude, this is awesome. Why aren't all the trades like this? This makes so much sense. Of course Steven wants a Fortress. Of course I want a Beldum. Like, it just makes sense. There's also Jasmine, who will give you a Steelix for anything, and that is also really cool. Sadly, these are in the post game, so they're not actually that useful, but they're still cool. And outside of that, pretty much everything is the same. Muscle the Machop now comes with the ability Guts, which makes it even better, so it is once again the best trade in the game. Generation 3. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Now, Hoenn is a little different because it built its trades around contests. The first trade that exists is you can trade your Pikachu for a Skitty in Fortree Town. Now, if I need to really spell out why this is a bad trade, we're probably just gonna not get along, but I still will. And basically, the issue is that Skitty was available before the first gym, and Pikachu isn't available until after reaching Fortree Town. So it's like, sure, this skitty was built for contests, but you could have given me another Pokemon that's more rare that was built for contests. You can also trade a fully evolved Blossom for Corsola in Pacific-Log. And the last trade specifically in Ruby Sapphire is for a Makuhita, which you can trade your Slackoth for. Now, Makuhita on its own, no trade experience, and a catch in the wild after the first gym is a crazy strong Pokemon. But giving it faster growth and another gym fight where it has a great matchup just makes it even better. Makuhita clears Roxanne, helps huge for Brawly, clears Surge, Watson, and Hariyama is one of the best Pokemon in the game for Norman. But once again, I need to poke holes in this trade. Unlike the Machop to beat Whitney trade, there are a ton of Pokemon that you can catch to beat Roxanne. And considering how good and early Makuhita is, it just didn't need special treatment. Think about how many Hoenn Pokemon are bad because of availability. Spoink, Meditite, Vulpix, Numel. Gosh, what about like a Spheal or a Snorunt? Ice types can't be caught until the 7th gym where the ice type habitat is, so I just don't get why we're giving Makuhita all this extra love. As far as best trade in the game goes though, it is Makuhita and it is not even close. I'll also just note here for Oraz that it's literally the exact same, so it once again goes to Makuhita. Now in Pokemon Emerald, I can confidently say that the NPC trades have been balanced. In Fortree City, you can trade Volbeat for Plusle, which I'm not even gonna bother to look up which one is trading for which. This is terrible. Actually, not only are they terrible, they're both already in the game at an earlier point. And yet in Pacific-Log, this is somehow worse. Trade offer of a lifetime. You climb to the ends of the earth to catch a pseudo-legendary at the top of Meteor Falls. In return, you receive a Pokemon that can be caught fishing 8 tiles to the left, with the fishing rod that you get in Pacific-Log. I'm sorry, this is so stupid, and if it makes you as mad as me, I think we should just all take our anger out on the subscribe button. Go ahead, just hit that guy. Now, if you're still not satisfied, Emerald does add one more NPC trait. In the post game, you can actually trade your skitty for a Meowth. Now, at the very least, this is a rare Pokemon that isn't available in Emerald. It is a Meowth. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. You're saying, wait, didn't you say that they balanced trades in Emerald? And yes, that is true, just possibly not in the way you're thinking. Because now the trade in Rustboro has changed where you can give up your Ralts for a Seedot. So that's Ralts, what has potential to become the best Pokemon in the game, for a Pokemon that learns its only stab move at level 31. And guess what? Seedot is already in the game at 1%. And at 4%, it's not like Ralts is an easy catch anyway. This trade could have literally been any Pokemon that comes late in the game, and it would have been better than this. But once again, it is just an absolute waste. It is, however, somehow the best trade in the game. Shiftry isn't amazing, but considering how early it comes and the fact that it gets boosted EXP, actually manages to turn this Pokemon into something that's okay. And so somehow, Seedot manages to be the best trade Pokemon in Emerald. Generation 4, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. All right, if you were angry from that, well, then listen, you've been angry about this next one for probably 15 years. Far north in the city of Snowpoint, there is a trainer so cold, some say her heart is made of pure ice. This trainer is so evil, she has a subreddit dedicated to her that has over 25,000 haters. r/fuckmindy has gained a massive following because while trading a Machamp for Haunter seems like an amazing deal, that is only the case until you realize the Haunter comes holding an Everstone. Listen, we all probably know this one, but like, can we just acknowledge how messed up this is? Trade evolution Pokemon are in a large way a paywall on a game that is already paywalled by having 2 identical versions of each other. So the absolute disrespect to your fans to then troll them with that mechanic is, I really don't know what to say other than this is evil. Especially considering that like Ghastly isn't hard to come by and Medicham is a really good Pokemon. I know it's a meme, I know we joke about it a lot, but I actually don't think that this gets enough hate. Now, outside of this trade, there is Buizel for a Chatot, which is basically just another Dex completion ad. I think this one is good. I think Chatot feels like it should be a gift Pokemon, so totally happy with that, even if Chatot isn't all that strong. And outside of that, the only other trade in the game is a Machop to get an Abra. And Abra can be found at the exact same point in which you trade to get one, which is very redundant. Now that said, it actually does make Abra way better, so I'm not even sure if I can totally hate on it. Making this an NPC trade means you can funnel levels into Machop and not have to swap grind, so it's the easiest version of Abra we've seen in the series. Double XP then allows Kadabra to keep up through the rest of the game. So in a vacuum, it's a trade that makes a lot of sense, and I think this would be a lot more acceptable if the other trades in the game were better, or if there was just more of them. But that said, Abra is the best trade Pokemon in all 3 iterations of Gen 4 Sinnoh. I also started a second channel where I recently uploaded my very first playthrough of Pokemon Platinum, so if you want to check that out after this video, SmithPlays Plus, link in the description. And while we're at it, we may as well cover BDSP, because nothing changes. Not even the Everstone. They were so faithful that they kept the Everstone. One of the many reasons people hate BDSP, and so once again, Abra is the best trade in BDSP. Generation 5, Black and White. So in this game, you can trade a Ditto for a Rotom, and all things considered, this is a very fair deal. It's the only way you can get Rotom on Gen 5, and it's nice that you don't even have to go about catching it. Unfortunately, this is only in the post-game, so it's not helping you for a playthrough, but that is kind of a Gen 5 thing. They didn't want to introduce non-Gen 5 Pokemon, so fair enough. There's also a post-game trade to get Munchlax for your Chinchino in Undella Town, and in Driftvale, you can trade a Minchino for one of the types of Basculin. Both versions come with a non-favorable ability, and you can also just catch one on the route right beside Driftvale, so yeah. Really dumb. Now there's also a trade for Emolga on Route 7 if you're willing to part with a Boldor. And this is a trade that is much better, but I still can't help but feel like is frustrating. Emolga has 428 base stats, which would make it an interesting strong pickup for the early game where most Pokemon are in the lower 300s. Unfortunately, Route 7 lines up perfectly right at the point in which Emolga starts falling off. The only thing it does well is for its upcoming fight against Skyla, and after that it is just not useful at all. So it's really frustrating because this could have been a cool early game trade that scaled into the late game with double XP, but instead it's just kind of useless. Now in Nat Green City, you can get a trade Cottony or Petilil. And what's genuinely really cool about this is you make the trade for the one that's not available in your game. Now the Cottony trade comes with the incredible Prankster, which makes all status moves priority. It also gets a modest nature, which is perfect since it raises its special attack stat and lowers its unused physical. But because Whimsicott is only really good as a support Pokemon, this is not the most useful for a playthrough. I mean, if you want to run Whimsicott and you don't have it in your game, pretty awesome. So it's not the perfect trade, but it is a very good one. On the other side of things, you have Petilil. This also comes with a modest nature, and it uses it a lot better than Cottony. Unfortunately, it also comes with its lesser ability Chlorophyll. The alternative is Own Tempo, which makes it so that it can just use Petal Dance as much as it wants and never get confused. But I mean, hey, it still comes with Leech Seed, Sleep, Quiver Dance, Strong Stab. It's a very good Pokemon. So not only is it a good trade, it's a good pickup, and it is by far the best trade in Pokemon Black and White. Now in Black and White 2, this trade is still available, but now on Route 4. And it loses its modest nature, but gains Timid. This still lowers its attack, but now it makes it faster instead of specialer. The real upgrade is that it now comes with Own Tempo. The question then is, how does it compare to the other trades of Black and White 2? You can now trade a Mantine to get a Tangrowth in Humalao City, and this technically just makes it so that Tangrowth comes a badge earlier than it was available otherwise. This is another sort of Johto-style trade, which is just kind of feeling a little bit redundant. It's also just kind of outclassed by Lilligant, so it's really just not the most necessary trade they could have added to the game. One really cool change though is that now instead of trading to get an Emolga, you can actually trade your Emolga to get the trade evolution Gigalith. And even though it's kind of late, this is an exceptional trade. It comes with Rock Slide, you can teach it Bulldoze. It's even got an Adamant Nature, which raises its attack and lowers its non-used special attack, destroys the Flying Gym right after you get it, and does reasonably good outside of the 8th gym. There's not a lot of good mid-game trades in Pokemon, but this is one of them. Now in Nimbasa, you can also get a ton of hidden ability Pokemon trades, but it's random and you only get one per day. You also have to return dropped items and call them 15 times, so it's like a bit of a process, but the biggest issue is really just that it lacks consistency. Like, yeah, you can get a Spiritomb or a Snorlax, but you're probably not gonna get a Spiritomb or a Snorlax, so we can't really say that they're the best trade in the game. It is cool though, I do like it, but all things considered, I would say that Petilil still remains the best trade in Black and White 2. Generation 6. X and Y. In X and Y, your rival Shauna will trade any one of your Pokemon for the starter that your original pick was strong against. Now, this is a really cool trade, and I love that they make the decks just a little bit easier to fill out. This happens obviously after you become champion though, so it's not something we can really rate. Also, similarly not useful, but thematically very cool is Diantha, who will trade you a Ralts. In the main game, however, you can get an Eevee trade from one of the hotels. Across Kalos, there is a maid that appears in one of the various hotels every day. And basically, if you talk to her enough times, she will trade you any Pokemon for her Eevee. Now, this has the potential to be incredible, since Eevee can turn into any evolution, and that's really good for team building. The evolutions are also just really good. But in terms of ranking, there's no real way to guarantee that you're gonna get this early enough to make it like the best trade in the game, so it's not. Plus, Eevee can be found on Route 10, so it's not even a unique trade. You can also get a super special Magikarp if you trade away your Gyarados. Now, this is actually a very special trade, and I like it a lot because the Magikarp comes with perfect IVs. This is obviously great for breeding, but it was especially useful if you were a competitive player. There's also Bunnelby for a Farfetch'd. And just before the 8th gym in Snowbell City, you can trade a Jigglypuff for a Bisharp. Now, in terms of being a good deal, this is like a 9 out of 10. Jigglypuff is the low value catch at this point in the game, and Bisharp, well, damn, that's a fully evolved Pokemon. Sure, it's not till the 8th gym, and sure, Steel isn't that useful for the rest of the game, but damn, that's a fully evolved Pokemon. Like, honestly, the bar is just on the floor. Well, it would be if it wasn't for this last trade. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I have found us the deal of a lifetime. Within Sillage City, there is a man looking for love. He doesn't need it in another human being. He simply just wants a love disc. Maybe that was a weird sentence. Maybe we'll just pretend I didn't say that. Anyway, this guy wants a love disc so bad that he will trade you one for a fully evolved Steelix before the 2nd gym. And love disc can be found on the beach outside of this city. This is insane, and I feel like nobody talks about it because Lucario exists and is just like so good, but dude, Steel type, even earlier, double XP, what? It's super effective to Rourke? You know, the guy with the Tyrant and a Mora. The Mora's 4 times weak to Steel. It's great for the Electric Gym, Fairy, Ice. It's decent against Malva's Torkoal, great for Wickstrom's Steel types, since, you know, ground. It also wrecks Drasna's Drogalge, and it's super effective against 3 of Champion Diantha's team members. This thing is so good, and it just makes me wonder why so many of the trades in this series are terrible. Like, maybe this is even a little bit too good, but it's a free trade evolution Pokemon, and that alone makes it awesome. And also, if you hadn't guessed by this point, it is by far the best trade Pokemon in the game. Generation 7. Sun and Moon. In Sun and Moon, we throw it back to the 2nd generation, where you can trade your Spearow to get a Machop. There's also trades to get Bounsweet and Poliwhirl, which are all not bad, but for the games they're in and what else is available, aren't exactly stand out. You can also trade your Pancham for a Happiny, which I guess at least is you're getting a Happiny. It's just not very good. And in Seafolk Village, you can trade your Granbull for a Steenie. This unfortunately comes way too late, and you had a Bounsweet trade earlier if you wanted to use that, so it's just like, why? There is, fortunately, one good trade, however. Around the 5th trial, there's a hiker who will trade you his Alolan Graveler for your Haunter. And guess what? It actually evolves into Alolan Golem. 7 generations, 3 trade evolution Pokemon. That is a sad number. This is a great trade, and it should be the standard. Alolan Golem has the same stats as Cantonian, so 120 attack and 130 defense, which is just really good. Matchup-wise, the league gives you Fighting, Rock, Ghost, and Flying, so obviously it's great for flying, but the rest isn't amazing. Rock Electric will also have good matchups on the champion, on Braviary and Ninetales, and even Incineroar if he has it, so it's pretty good here as well. Alolan Golem is certainly not the best Pokemon, but it's also the only way you can get Alolan Golem, and that alone makes it very awesome and also the best trade in the game. Now, in Ultra Sun and Moon, on just Route 2, you could trade your Spearow now for Hawlucha. Oh boy. For the low price of Spearow, you get a Pokemon with amazing stats for this point in the game that learns consistently great moves throughout the rest of it. All on that sweet, juicy double XP. Now, on Route 5, you can trade a Lillipup for a Noibat. Now, sometimes mistaken for a Pseudo, it's not, and we determined that in another video. This is a Dragon type. At 245 stats though, Noibat, even with double EXP, is really bad. Now, I should mention that I actually like the idea of this trade. Let's just say that this was an actual pseudo and the game was throwing you an olive branch because they recognize that pseudos take a long time to grow. The issue is that there's no mid-stage evolution between Noibat and Noivern. So you're running a Pokemon with 245 base stats all the way up to level 48. Keep in mind, 48 is the same level as Garchomp, and Noivern is certainly no Garchomp. So I do want to clarify that I really appreciate what they were going for. I think they had the right idea. The issue here is more just the design of Noibat. Now, a little bit after that, you can trade a Tentacool for Barboach, which is fine. There's Trumbeak for Arbok, which is not really worth it. There's also Granbull for Shellos, which is fine, and Beware to get a Tauros, which is just really late. But another really cool trade in this game is Phantump for Phantump, which just evolves straight into Trevenant. Another one of those trades that I'm just honestly surprised we haven't seen more of. Narratively, it would make sense that there'd be other NPCs in the game that want to trade their Pokemon and are like, hey, I'll trade you mine for yours. And this is the first time we've ever seen that. So Alola actually has some pretty sensical trades. The question we now need to ask ourselves is, what is the best? Well, it's pretty hard to deny fighting flying. This is super effective against every trial and Kahuna on the first 2 islands except for one fight. Flying also avoids Hapu's Step ground moves, it's super effective against Guzma and 3 of Lusamine's Pokemon. It's super effective against 2 of the 4 Elite Four members and at least 2 of the Champion's Pokemon. Hawlucha is not just the best trade Pokemon in Ultra Sun and Moon, it is one of the best trade Pokemon in the franchise. Now, I'm often a bit critical of Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, but if there's one thing that these games nailed, it's actually the trades. Because every single trade in this game is a Kanto version Pokemon for its Alolan counterpart. This is smart. This is incredible. This is some of Game Freak's best work. Starting in Cerulean City, you have Alolan Rattata, which comes at level 12, but it starts as a dark type knowing bite, which makes it instantly great for Misty Starmie. Alolan Vulpix comes in Celadon City at level 27 with Ice Beam, and you already have Dazzling Gleam. And what absolute perfect timing that is, considering it's right before the Grass Gym. Celadon Department Store even sells Ice Stones to evolve it right away. Now, it is sadly a Let's Go Eevee exclusive, so that's not obviously good for Pikachu players, but Sandshrew is the equivalent for Let's Go Pikachu players, and while it's not quite as good, it is still quite useful for Erica. There's Alolan Diglett in Lavender Town, which comes at level 25 and can evolve immediately. Stab Dig with Poison Immunity makes it great for the upcoming Rocket Hideout and Koga. Alolan Raichu comes at level 30 and Saffron with Psychic, and you can instantly teach it Thunderbolt from Surge. Also, Alolan Raichu, damn, just what an absolute peak design. There's also Alolan Marowak, which is okay and comes pretty late, but does get Bone Meringue and Swords Dance. And lastly, Alolan Grimer, Meowth, and Exeggutor come way too late to really contribute. Exeggutor and Muck, don't get me wrong, are both great, but you're only really getting them for a few fights, so they're not the most helpful Pokemon. Now, all things considered, I would actually put this up as a tie between Alolan Ninetales and Alolan Raticate. And honestly, considering that this is like one of the only dark Pokemon you can get in the game and it's super early, I kind of think I have to give it to Raticate. Psychic may not be as good in Gen 7, but a big part of that is because there's so many more Dark-type Pokemon, and Kanto doesn't have that. And yeah, Raticate is just really good. The bigger win, though, is just the game in general. They absolutely cooked with these trades. It's the only time they've ever done it, and one of the only times they ever did. Generation 8. Sword and Shield. All right, let's just get the not so good ones out of the way. Squavit, Meowth, Cottony are all available for trading pretty early and all kind of suck for a playthrough. A bit later, there's Galarian Yamask for a regular Yamask, which almost feels like a downgrade, so that's not it either, but it is good for a dex fill. Now, there's a trade in Hammerlock where you could trade a Toxel for a level 25 Togepi, which always has Serene Grace. And this is a great ability because it doubles the chance of a move having its secondary effect. Togetic gets Ancient Power, so 20% chance for Omni Boost, but Togekiss can also relearn Air Slash, giving you a 60% chance to flinch. And you can get a free Toxel from the Route 5 daycare, so this is a pretty crazy trade. The game also has Maractus for Hatena in Sword and Impidimp in Shield. There's also a trade of Vanillish for Throw and Sock, which is okay, but honestly, kind of mediocre, and like, why would you ever make this trade? There's also Cantonian Mr. Mime, which is okay, but comes just in time for the Dark Gym. But one type of trade that we don't see very often is good and late. Your Frostmoth for a Duraludon is quite excellent. It comes at level 50, and gaining double XP means that this thing can get into shape for the endgame without a lot of struggle. And as a Dragon Steel type, it's just as good as you would expect. Now, to get Frostmoth, you can catch a Snom on Route 8, but you have to go through a friendship evolution to actually make the trade. Now, this is a pretty big effort, but on the other side of things, Duraludon only comes at a 1% encounter rate and obviously wouldn't have the double XP, so it's actually a pretty okay trade. You do also have the trades in the Isle of Armor, but they're really all just for filling out the decks with other regional Pokemon, and none of them really help all that much. So all things considered, I do call it Duraludon, and I do like the Duraludon trade, but unfortunately, I just don't think it's quite as strong as the Togepi one. Air/Togekiss really just is that good. And as for Pokemon Legends Arceus, there are no trades. That's it. That's the section. Generation 9, Scarlet and Violet. Okay, before we finish up here, can we just note how weird the trades of this franchise are? I would love if people want to put up an argument against my general thesis that the trades are bad. I just don't really see it. I feel like 50% of the trades in this series are genuinely useless. Maybe another 20 to 30% are for Pokedex completion, which is fine. And then maybe 20% of them favorably are like actually useful things that you would want to play the game with. And isn't that like the main point of trades? To bring it all home, it really just feels like a bit of a wasted mechanic, especially when you consider how much potential it had. Scarlet and Violet, however, does manage to redeem itself in one big way. And I should really stress it's just one. In Kirtondo, you can trade any form Flabebe for a Snom. This is a borderline scam. Frostmoth is a bad Pokemon. It's a friendship evolution. You can just go catch a Frostmoth later in the game. Do not do this. This is stupid. This is bad game design once again. In Cascarafa, you can trade a Paldean Wooper for a normal Wooper. Now, at the very least, this is a Whoopie boy, so I mean, it's, I'm not hating on the man, but this trainer, evil person, only raised this thing to level 18, and Paldean Wooper, in the context of Generation 9, is technically better than the Whoopie boy. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that maybe they could have given the man a little bit more, because I'm just not seeing a very good value trade, personally. Now, surprisingly, there is only one more trade in Scarlet and Violet. For such a big game, it's crazy that this has less trades than Red and Blue, Crystal, Emerald, Platinum. There are DLC ones, but that's behind a paywall, so we don't count those. Fortunately, this last trade is quite satisfying, because after 15 years of suffering, pain, sadness, throwing up every night, Scarlet and Violet finally gave players the redemption we've always deserved. Pincurchin can be found on the beach directly south of Levincia. And in Levincia City, there is in fact a trainer that has played Pokemon Platinum on their Switch. They will trade your Pincurchin for a Haunter. And guess what? It's just a Haunter. Doesn't come with an item. There's no Everstone. You make the trade, and you get a Gengar. I don't know, Game Freak, how painful was that? And on top of that, it's really good. It comes at level 25 before like the second or third gym. The third gym is really hard. You got a Gengar? It's fantastic, and man, does it feel good to end this video saying that Gengar is the best trade Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. All right, sweet. The algorithm doesn't want me to say this, but that's it for you right now. No more YouTube. Just click on this video, add it to your watch later, go for a walk, come back, and I'll see you soon. Bye.